You can tell, I think, that our speaker is very important because for the first time ever, I'm wearing a jacket. I just wanted her to hear that, too. What we're going to do today, first of all, I've been asked, and I often say it before, but please take a moment to turn off your cell phones, particularly when we're trying to cover so much ground. You know the drill. This topic continues to be extremely timely. We talked about it, we had the debate about it 2 weeks ago, and one could think, well, we've covered that, let's move on to other things. As most of you know, last night in Georgia, a new bill was passed, signed by the governor into law, passed by the House the night before last, yesterday, passed by the Senate and signed the law, 24 hours to pass this bill. Among other things, it denies or it prohibits people from handing water or anything else to people standing in line to vote. It's a truly draconian bill, which had it been passed prior to Shelby, the Supreme Court case, the Federal Election Commission would have said you can't do it until we examine it to see if any elements of it have any characteristics of suppression. Of course, now that Shelby doesn't exist, the law can be passed as soon as there is a sufficient majority in the state legislature and the governor signs it. 48 states have similar laws winding their way through the state legislatures, including Florida. Our guest today, Vicki Oakes, a name everyone here knows, some of you may have met her or heard her speak before, is part of a 67-member group of election supervisors here in Florida. And part of what they've been doing, unrelated to H.R. 1, is following the law as it moves its way through the Florida state legislature. And I think it's fair to say that the group is generally opposed to these laws. I've said in both that an attitude of state regulators, it would be fair to say that both at the federal level, from let's say the left, and the state level from the right, efforts are being made to fix what ain't broke. In some states, I think that's totally true, and I suspect Florida is more advanced than most states in having an excellent voting law that is fair, efficient, and open and secure. There are other states with less effective voting rules. But nonetheless, the efforts to change it have to be looked at in part by the motivation behind them. We'll talk about that later. We're going to work this morning. Vicki's going to talk for as long as she wants. And following that, we're going to do question and answers. But roughly half the meeting, her presentation, which will include, I hope, addressing virtually everything we've talked about in terms of voter regulation, restrictions, and efforts to get around them, efforts to suppress and efforts to make more easy. With that, Vicki, you're on.
Thank you, Bob, and I appreciate you all having me today. And oh, Bob, don't ever tell me that I can talk as long as I want to, because we would literally be here half the day. Because to me, as your independently elected supervisor of elections, I want you to understand I am always an advocate for our voters. Here in St. Johns County, we have very, very smooth run elections. Our governor and our state legislators have applauded relentlessly the job that we did in the November election, stating that Florida is a model for other states and how elections should be conducted. But, and I'll just tell you, I stand shoulder to shoulder with all 67 supervisors who adamantly oppose some of the ongoing legislation in the state of Florida. And I just told Bob, I said, my head is about to explode from the HR 1 and from the bills in the other states and what's going on in Florida. What I have to focus my time and efforts on is being interactive with our state legislators here, because that's where I can do the most good. But before we can even go there, what's important to me is to educate our voters and let you know what this model system that we have in Florida looks like. Because I'll bet you most of you don't know. Did you know how easy it is to register in Florida? It's very easy to register to vote. When you get your driver's license, they'll ask you, would you like to register to vote or update your voter information? You can do it right then and there. Your public library. How many of us go to the Ponte Vedra Library on a regular basis? I love my library, support my libraries. You can register to vote or make party changes right at your public library. Any armed forces recruiting office, any public assistance agency in our state, you can register to vote. And in 2017, Florida went online with voter registration. You can sit right on your couch and register to vote from your home. It's available to you 24/7. But you know what goes with that? I call it the R word. Responsibility. Because, we do a lot of voter education in our high schools, our colleges. We start at the elementary level and do civics programs for 7th graders, which is another whole topic and one I don't know that I'll get to today, but I do have it on my list. And I tell the students every year we visit every high school in this county to do a voter education program for our seniors who are turning 18. They can pre-register at 16. And I tell them, part of being an adult, you have several responsibilities. You learn how to drive a car. You're going to get a job. You're going to pay taxes. You can register to vote, but it's your responsibility to register. We offer registration right in our schools, and we offer online voter registration. So we do a lot of education. I tell them it's your responsibility because I'm not a mind reader. I got upwards of 350,000 residents or so of St. Johns County. We'll know in a little while when the census gives us our information. It's very easy to register to vote, but that's on you. You have to be a responsible, part of being a responsible adult, to exercise one of the most cherished rights that we have as citizens of our country. That's on you. You can be a responsible adult. So now that we know how easy voter registration is, I want to tell you about our Florida voter registration system. Went into effect January 1st, 2006. It is a statewide voter registration system, and when you register to vote in Florida, you have one voter record. It travels with you wherever you go. When you move from county to county, when you make an address change, when you update your information, when you vote, your voter history, everything in your voter record is updated. That's pretty cool, and we can track you. So say it's getting close to election time, and you've moved recently to Duval County. You just simply contact the Duval County Elections Office, let them know that you have moved from St. Johns County. They will go out on the statewide system. They'll find your registration, verify all your information, move you over to Duval County. You can even do that on election day at your polling place or during early voting. You can make that change anytime. But then when you vote, your history is also updated, so we know that you have already voted. As a component, there are many components of our Florida voter registration system. When you register at DMV or change your address, that information comes to us electronically. We are online with Social Security, with Bureau of Vital Statistics, so that when a voter in Florida passes away, we're automatically notified and they're removed from the rolls. I'll use my own father as an example. He was living in the house in my home with me when he passed away. And before I got the death certificate, 10 days after he passed, he had already been removed from our voter rolls. It's an ongoing daily process. Happens every day. Our court systems, clemency, more components of our Florida voter registration system, so that when someone's convicted of a felony, we receive notification and we let them know, send them a notice, tell them your voter registration is being removed because of your felony conviction. Ongoing daily processes. We get information all the time from different agencies that people have moved. And they're updated on a regular basis. So that's a really great thing. That's another process that we have that has expanded and changed over the years that really help us with voter fraud. Because when you register to vote on your application, you provide your driver's license number or your Florida ID or the last 4 digits of your Social Security. We enter it into our system, it goes up to the state, there's a matching process that happens. Once you are confirmed that you really are an individual, then that information is sent back to us. You are registered to vote and you receive your voter information card in the mail. If your information doesn't match, then we get notified, we reach out to the voter and request information on their ID. I really like that because we've come a long way from the time that 33 years ago when I first went to work for the elections office, because you don't have John Wayne showing up at the polls, filling out a voter registration application, trying to vote. That's why I have a problem with same-day registration, because of the responsibility voters have, verification that you are indeed a registered voter in order to cast a ballot that is legitimate and to be counted, and the verification process that is trackable with voter history for every voter that votes. So, speaking of same-day registration, there's some other election administrative components that kind of go along with that. How would you like to have a party at your house, Bob? Say you invite 500 people.
Here.
Okay. And you can't RSVP. No RSVP allowed. You invite 500 people. How are you going to know how much food to have for them? How are you going to know if you need to get people to help you with that? How are you going to have enough places for them to park? How are you going to prepare? I like it that our voter rolls close 29 days before an election because I have polling places. I need to know how many voters are potentially going to the polls, because I have to hire and train poll workers. I have to have enough ballots for those voters to be able to vote and enough materials for those voters. So there's a lot involved in election administration, and I'll just leave it with that, my point being. I've already talked a little bit about our voter education program that we have. Voter fraud is a big concern, but we have, as supervisors, many tools in our toolbox to help us with that, and as a result, we have very, very little documented voter fraud in the state of Florida. Some of those tools include the verification process with our voter registration system. Florida requires ID at the polls when you vote in person. And we use electronic poll books during early voting and at our precincts on election day. How many of you have gone to the polls? I know this year a lot of people voted by mail. They ask for your driver's license. They swipe it, pull up your voter record. Guess what? They can see if you've requested a vote by mail ballot. They can see if you've already voted, because your record will say this voter has already voted. Real time with our electronic poll books help us guarantee that no person can vote twice. I'll just tell you, I had a lady, she thought she was going to be pretty slick. She wanted to check the system. She even called me afterwards. During the November election, she went to early vote. She'd already got a vote by mail ballot. And she called me and she said, I just want you to know what I did. I said, okay. She said, I got a vote by mail ballot, and when I went into the early voting site to cast my ballot, I dropped my ballot in the ballot box, so it's been counted. And then I walked over, I got checked in, they issued me a ballot, and I voted, so I voted twice. She said, I wanted to test the system. I said, you know, I prosecute people for voting twice. Thank you for letting me know. But here's what you need to know. That vote, your vote by mail ballot that you put in the drop box, it will come back to the office. It will be checked in. Just because you drop it in the box doesn't mean it's counted. It's come back to my office, and when we go to check that in, the worker that checks that in at my office is going to get a message that says, this voter has already voted, and your vote by mail ballot will be blocked and will not be counted. So let me just tell you, you have not been successful in voting twice. Should I prosecute you? Oh no, please don't do that. And I said, you know, we have a pretty tight system, just for reasons such as this. Another part of the model of our system. Now we talk some about, you've all heard the term voter purge. In HR 1, I took a look at it, and it had a section on what was called voter caging. And I have to tell you all, I've never heard that term before. I never have. Okay, let me go see what this looks like. I have no idea what that is. But I read through it, and what it's talking about is our list maintenance process that we do. One thing I will tell you, I am proud of our St. Johns County voters. Do you know, in November, we were the third highest county in Florida voter turnout. We had an 85%. Go voters! We are consistently among the top 5 counties in Florida with voter turnout, consistently. But we also had about 32,000 voters in November that are on our St. Johns County rolls that didn't bother to vote. And I wonder a lot about that. So our list maintenance processes reach out to voters pretty much on a regular basis because, I quote, the law says, in order to protect the integrity of the electoral process and maintain accurate and current voter registration records. That's why we do list maintenance. We run our voter rolls every quarter against national change of address. If you're a voter and you put in a national change of address, let the post office know you moved. We get that information quarterly. If you've moved to another county in Florida, we send that county notification. They take your voter record, move it over. Great. You're already where you need to go. If you've moved out of state, we send a notice to you to ask you, have you moved from Florida, or our records, is this correct? The voter has an opportunity to complete that, say yes, or no, that's not correct, or yes, I've moved from Florida. So this helps us keep our voter rolls current. One process Florida law requires that we do is every odd numbered year, we're going to be doing that this year, we are required to reach out to voters who have not voted in the last 2 years nor had any activity in their voter record. No activity. No address changes, no party changes, no information. And they haven't voted. So I had my staff pull a report. Can you tell me how many people that is? Yeah, about 15,000 on our voter rolls. And I had them take that data and pull some information I want to share with you. In St. Johns County voter rolls right now, I have 6,824 people who are on my voter rolls that have registered to vote, some registrations dating back to 1992 who have never voted. I have 1,329 that last voted in 2006. I have another 1,835 that last voted in 2010. I won't go over all of them, but I have 3,200 who last voted in 2016. And don't we wonder why people register to vote and don't vote? Well, I'll tell you why. It's always about the money. Did you know that our property appraiser requires you, in order to file for your homestead exemption, to be a registered voter? And you have to provide for them your voter ID number. Did you know that? I had a man come in the office 2 days after the general election. I'd like to register to vote. You just missed the biggest election, most important election. He said, oh, I have no intention of voting. I'm signing my son up for college, and in order to get the Florida residency exemption, I have to give him a voter ID number. So can I have my card? I said, no, there's a verification system that has to go through. We're a little busy right now. Fill out your application. We will get your card to you when you can. He called us the next week, demanded that we give him his voter card. He needed his number for his son's college application. This is one reason I'm against automatic voter registration. We carry people on our rolls who, these voters since 1992, every election get a sample ballot from my office. Every election. And when you start adding up numbers and you start adding the cost, thank you very much, St. Johns County taxpayers, because it gets in your pocket. It gets in your pocket. It's important that we have accurate voter rolls. One thing we're starting this year is called the ERIC project. I'm very excited about this. This is something new. We adopted the legislation a couple years ago. That's the cross-checking of voter information between states. And that's happening right now. The ERIC project has nothing to do with the federal government. It is a consortium of states that is owned by the states that join the project. Right now, there are 30 states plus DC who are in the ERIC project. Florida has just sent their voter rolls off to be matched with the other 31 states, or 30 states plus DC. And we will be getting that information back. This is our first time that we're going to have that process. But no one gets removed from the rolls without us contacting the voter. There's certain information that has to be confirmed, verified, social security number. We have to look at each one individually. So how that information is going to come to us, we're still not clear, waiting for the state to get back with us on that. But that's part of our process that we're going to be new this year, and I'm very excited, very, very excited about that. So a couple of other things I want to touch on, because I'm running out of time, I see, is I've been in the elections office for 33 years now. I developed a slogan, and my slogan is, voting has never been easier than it is today. Because if you want to register to vote, take the time and fill out a voter registration application. You can. It's that easy. If you want, any registered voter can request a ballot and vote by mail. Now, Florida does not mail to all voters, and I'm glad we don't, because if I had to mail a ballot about a little over $2.50 a piece, we'd be hitting $500,000 to mail every voter in St. Johns County a ballot. I'm glad we don't do that, because I have to present my budget every year to the Board of County Commissioners, because it comes out of your pocket, and mine too. I'm a taxpayer. But you have to tell me. I'm not a mind reader. You have to ask, simply ask for a vote by mail ballot. We mail them all over the world. Our military and overseas voters. Just have to ask. We have early voting. I love early voting. The best thing that Florida ever did started as we know it in 2006. We had over 42% of our voters, 93,000 plus, that took advantage of voting early in the general election. What we're seeing is trends are changing over time. Vote by mail and early voting in November, 87% of our voters who participated in November's general election voted ahead of Election Day. Only 13% of our voters actually went to the polls on Election Day. Our law allows us to begin opening and counting ballots before Election Day, so that, you know, everybody wants results at 7:01 when the polls close. Everybody does. Of course. Of course, and that's what allows us to be able to have that information available to our voters. And honestly, I have to say, I don't know why states. There was a time in Florida law in 1988 when I went to work at the elections office that we could not begin opening and processing vote by mail ballots until after the polls closed, and I'm so glad that changed. I'm so glad that changed. You know, election night, I was home by 10 o'clock. I'd be home by bedtime. I was the last one out of the office, 10 o'clock. All the polls were closed. I could talk about security. One thing, just a couple of more things. I'm running out of time. A couple more things I want to talk about our election security and our audit processes that we already have in place. Our world has changed. Because of the internet and technology, we all see it every day. We all see it. But Florida has the most safest voting system that there is, and it's called a paper ballot. And I don't care what anyone tells you, you can't hack a piece of paper. It can't be done. St. Johns County has been on paper ballots since 1994. And when the 2000 election came along, we sailed right through it. We had no problems because we were already on paper ballot. Every voter in Florida has been voting on paper ballots since 2008. We have a great system. And whether you know it or not, our voting system is not open to the internet. Did you hear me? I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Our voting system is not open to the internet. It's on a single server in my office that programs and tabulates the election results. And that's the same with most voting systems. Now, what I will tell you is, we have many audit processes that begin at our early voting sites and our precinct, where every voter that's checked in, every voter ballot that's issued, every ballot that's tabulated is accounted for in a three-way check every day of early voting and every day at the precinct. And we have to, at the end, we have to report that to Tallahassee and justify our voter turnout. So when our polls close election night, the poll workers hit the close polls button. A tape prints out, 3 of them actually, prints out of all the election results. They do modem the results, but we use a private network. A lot of us have moved off of the internet quite some time ago. After 16, what do you think and how much money do you think your election supervisors have been spending to secure our networks? It is a new day. We are part of a huge effort. We have our own EI ISAC unit that works with not only CISA, Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, and local partners we have that have secured our office networks. And the money that I have spent locally, federally, and state that I have received and on my office network is where our voter registration files are completely separate from our tabulation system. We now even have what's called an Albert server that is monitored by MSISAC 24/7. Everything that comes across our networks are now monitored 24/7. It's about as tight as it's going to get. We have spent years tightening things down, and you never hear about that. Once the polls close, ballots, media, everything's brought to our office. Everything. We do an audit right then and right there to make sure that every ballot is in, every ballot has been accounted for, and we do that election night before we go home, so we know that the results we have released election night are complete. Florida has also what's a manual audit process. There's 2 ways you can do an election. For the last 15 years, after every election, we are required by law to, at random draw race and a precinct, go and retrieve the vote by mail, early voting, and precinct ballots, hand count them, and compare them against our tabulated totals. You don't ever hear about that. We've been doing it for 15 years. Every election we have. And do you want to know that our election results have always been 100%? Always. With the exception of the November election. I was 1 ballot off. And I was about to have a stroke, I'll tell y'all. Because our audits have always been 100%. But here's how tight our system is. I was missing 1 ballot. My tabulated results did not match the hand count of our ballots. So we knew it was an early voting site, an early voting ballot. We narrowed it down to which day it was. We checked the paperwork from that early voting site. We found the documentation the clerk had. We were able to trace it back to the voter who had put his ballot in the tabulator. The ballot jammed. The poll worker did not catch the message that said, your ballot has been counted. So when the jam was removed, the voter was instructed to go over to the clerk, get a new ballot so you can duplicate your ballot and have it count properly. And the guy said, I'm not doing that, I'm out of here. And he left with his ballot. I can tell you who it was. That's how tight our system is, and for the first time, our audit was 99.9982% accurate.
Wow.
Some counties have bought a clear ballot system that they actually do a separate tabulation of their ballots. Theirs are always 100%. So we have a pretty tight system. We have a great system. We have manual processes in place. I'm very, very comfortable with the system that we have. I am sad that some of the changes that are coming, but our supervisors are making great effort collaboratively along with some of the other entities, people that are coming out against it. So we're working on it. We're working on it because I think we have a great system that you can register to vote when you want to. You can exercise your right to vote. It's really easy. It's really easy. And I'm glad that Florida has turned out a model, and I'm proud to have been a part of that. And Bob, I'm a little over my time, but I'll let you, we'll open it up for questions.
Before anything else, just fabulous. I have a couple of quick questions before we go to the audience.
Okay.
Is Miami-Dade as robust in their accuracy and their audits and in their voting system as you are?
Miami-Dade County has the exact same voting system that we have. They use the ES&S tabulators, the same software, the same electronic poll books. All 67 counties operate under the same laws. Miami-Dade, yes, they do. Now, it's up to the local supervisor. In order to purchase voting equipment, it must be certified not only federally by the EAC, it also must be certified by the state of Florida. And there's only a couple of vendors that are certified to sell voting equipment, and it must be, number one, is it must be a paper ballot.
Hidden behind my question was the sort of the assumption that some people make, well, in a lily white, well-educated county like St. John's, of course the voting is accurate and honest. But if you go to a mixed race, populated urban area like Miami, there you see the influence of those people, and it won't be so accurate. I'm delighted to hear that it is, because I've always thought that was a crazy argument. The second thing is, I made some notes as you were speaking, the difference between our system here in Florida and what H.R. 1 proposes in terms of the automated registration system is that we have an opt-in system as opposed to an opt-out system. You can, automatic voting says, automatic registration says driver's licenses, Social Security, any interaction with the government, you're registered. And that requires cost to this system, and I appreciate that. You'll have more of those voters registered, not voting, to whom you have to send out ballots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the difference is really just that. If they don't actively opt in, their responsibility, they're not registered, as opposed to H.R. 1, which says you're registered as soon as you interact, right?
And part of the concern of that is, and the only, I'll call it hole that exists in the Florida voter registration system, which is my concern, is that you're not registering people that are not citizens of our country and not eligible to vote. I don't have any way to check it, to be perfectly honest with you, Bob, there is only one entity that has that information, and that is the federal government. It is called the Alien Registration Database. A couple years ago, Florida sued because we wanted to have that verification be a part of the Florida voter registration system to ensure that we only have citizens of this country on our voter rolls and participating in this in the election, because that's what the law says.
So that data is not so much because they should be entitled to vote, it's to make sure that they're not trying to vote.
Yes, and they're not registering. So we sued. They said, no, we're not giving you that information. We took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, nope, can't have it. There are 2 states, Arizona, New Mexico, that have passed laws that have said, in order to register to vote in our states, you must provide us your citizenship documentation. Guess what? They got sued. Both states, right off to the Supreme Court they went. The Supreme Court said, I'm sorry, that's unconstitutional. You can't provide that. That's where we are today, folks. I have no way to check, and that's the fact. And not just citizens, people that are felons, people that aren't really eligible to register to vote.
What do you think the number is of those inappropriate, I'll call them, registered voters who actually show up to vote and those votes are counted improperly? Is it a tiny, tiny number, or is it a large number?
I would say probably small, because Florida did this supposed matching a couple of years back while we were in the process. There were like 2,600 voters statewide. They sent the numbers to all the counties. I got 3 names that were on our rolls. We were never really able to find the people. Some of the counties it did come out that people voluntarily removed themselves from the voter rolls when asked about it. But I would say probably very small.
Yeah. Although if I were to run for something, those 3 votes would matter a great deal to me, I think. Other questions, very quickly. The ERIC project is in 30 states. Why are not the other 20?
Because it is up to the states to join. It is not mandatory. ERIC project is relatively new. It started about 5 to 7 years ago.
Okay, so
It was kind of a new concept, and it was a project of several individuals that thought it was a really great idea, started proposing it, and one thing that I really like about the ERIC project is that they receive not only our voter rolls, they also receive our driver's license rolls. They match them. And then they give us information about voters that have moved and not changed their address with us. So that helps us. So it's a volunteer. You kind of have to pay to join it, but it's not bad. It only
seems
costs...
like a no-brainer. Let's go questions in the audience. We've got a couple people with mics. Forrest, wait just a second. In the auditorium, it takes longer for these sprinters to get to the questionnaires.
This one's acting down.
You probably ought to think us go to the mic. I have 2 simple questions, Vicki. One is, as an absentee ballot voter, which I've been a long time because I love to see the full ballot, is if I'm actively voting, do I have to worry about a 2-year time limit? That's one question.
Currently, if you request a ballot today, it is good for 2 federal elections. So if you call and ask today, you will receive a ballot for the 2022 and the 2024 election. However, that's one of the laws that our state legislature is currently trying to change to make it 1 year. And I get that, because we had about 35,000 vote-by-mail ballots returned to us this year as undeliverable.
I understand that. The second part relates to HR 1. And the first part of the question is, are you as a supervisor more concerned about losing power in Tallahassee, or dealing with people in Tallahassee as far as the Florida election laws, versus all that, good bit of that transferred to Congress?
Yeah, because quite frankly, I think they need to stay out of our business. And here's why. You know, there's 5 states that are vote-by-mail states. Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Hawaii. There's one other. Do you know that Washington and Oregon have not opened polls in over 20 years? Their voters vote by mail. They conduct their elections by mail. That's how they want to do it there. And can you imagine? My inventory right now, $2 million I have invested in my voting equipment. I'm getting ready to spend another $1 million, by the way, because of the growth of this county. So I'll have $3 million just for my 215,000 registered voters. Why should we tell the state of Washington and Oregon that you can't do that any longer? You can't. And now you have to conduct early voting. Now you have to change what you're doing. You have to go out, buy voting equipment. You have to provide for this. You have to train poll workers. You have to find polling places. Do you know how backward that would be to them? I am a states' rights gal. I gotta tell you.
Me too. Second part of my question about HR 1, do you have other concerns? And thank you for being here.
You're welcome. I'm a states' rights gal. I think states ought to be, have the right to say how we were going to conduct our elections. I am. And I don't think that I want the federal government telling me or our voters that one of these days when they change their mind and think it would be good for everybody to just have vote by mail elections, that we ought to do that, or have online voting. Oh, that's another subject. You don't want to go there because of the security.
I'm sorry. Jenny, you have a question?
Yes. A couple years ago, there was a rumor that the post office had deliberately held up mail-in votes in the Gwillem election. Is that rumor true, A? And B, if it is true, what has been done to correct that?
I can neither confirm nor deny any rumors. What I will tell you was, when you put your ballot in the hands, and when I place ballots in the hands of the United States Postal Service, it is out of my hands. That's why I love our drop boxes at our early voting locations so much, because you know what? That's the gold standard. That is the gold standard of security on your vote by mail ballot from your hand to mine. And that's why supervisors are pushing back so much on wanting to get rid of the drop boxes. One great thing about it is a lot of us, I use the mail, I still write checks, I still put my bills in the mail. I don't have any problem with them. I will tell you, though, that this was one of the most, with November, most participated election that we've had. We mail vote by mail ballots out 40 days before the election. The overseas and military, they go 45 days. They're the first ones to go. And do you know, voters voted them and immediately sent them back to us. They didn't wait until the 2 days before the election to mail their ballot. Again, voters have a responsibility, but we have tools right online that you can log on You can go to our website, put your information, pull your voter record up. Did you know you can track your vote by mail ballot? From the day that it's requested, the day that it's mailed, the address it's mailed to, the date that the elections office received it, and you can even confirm right online that your ballot has been counted. Did you know that? Okay, you're a good voter.
A question that I'd ask, and this applies to both Forrest's position and yours, as much as I applaud particularly what you're doing here in Florida, I just think it's fabulous. States' rights says that what happened last night in Georgia is totally appropriate because that's their right to suppress the votes, make voting hard, particularly making it hard for voters in certain classes. That troubles me. What makes a Georgia citizen of the United States any less a citizen than one in Florida? And likewise, I think the idea of saying to Washington State, who have, as I understand it, a very high percentage of voting under the mail system they've used for 20 years. I mean, it's very successful, very safe, very secure. You have to buy all that equipment and establish an in-person voting system. They have the right to do it their way, and I happen to like that system. But I don't like the system. I don't like the system proposed by the Florida legislature any more than you all do, nor the Georgia system, nor the, 42 states that have similar proposals. That's what we get from states' rights without any federal regulation. Does that trouble you at all?
I think it's more important to generally look overall. As a supervisor, I can affect change, hopefully, because we're working on it. I still think that states really need the right, and you know as well as I do, over the years the pendulum swings. And even though things may change, people are still going to be able to vote.
Even if they do everything that the Florida House and Senate bills propose, taking away the drop boxes, limiting the days of voting, all of those things that you've been so successful in implementing, you'll still be happy with that?
Well, I'll tell you, they got so much pushback on the drop boxes that they've already said, okay, well, let's just define what we mean by secure. Okay, my boxes are secure, but I'll give. So we've already implemented. We've already been successful in pushing back and getting some changes. Every state's different. States also have a right to set their education requirements, their roads, their healthcare systems. There's a lot of states' rights, not just voting.
I grew up in Idaho, where states' rights are very important to all of us. And we've had the right to one of the worst education systems in the country. We have the right to several other wonderful accolades that I wouldn't want to name. Any other questions? Don?
Here in the state of Florida, are all students graduating from high school required to obtain a course in civics?
Now that's an education question, not an elections question, but I will tell you that we have some great teachers in St. Johns County. And part of our programs, voter education programs that we do in the schools, I have a number of 7th grade civics teachers that I work with, and I go to the schools for the 7th graders when they ask us to be a participant in their program, and I never say no unless it's election time.
Can I modify that question just a little bit? Do you go to every single school in the county, Vicki?
The high schools we do, because we're required to do that. Some of the other education programs, for example, The civics programs, that's not required, but a couple years ago, some of the different civics teachers started reaching out to us, and we've been attend a number of the middle schools with that.
What about private schools and religious schools? Do you go to all of those as well?
We do go to the private high schools, yes. We go to the colleges as well, not just high school, but colleges. And anytime we're invited to go anywhere, I get a lot of, COVID's kind of put a squash on a lot of our stuff. We're doing our high school programs virtually this year because we don't want to miss a year. But we are very, very active in we start with the elementary schools. There's a great program, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of it, called the Sunshine State Reader Program. It's promoted by the librarians. They have a list of books age appropriate, where if you read at least 13 books on the list, you can participate in the election of your favorite book. And we go into the schools and we hold those elections for them. We go to their libraries. We set the library up as a polling place. And the kids get to vote starting at kindergarten because we want them to see how easy voting is and start them young.
One of the topics we may want to bring up at current events sometime in the future, I don't know if I sent something out about it, but there was a period when STEM education, science, technology, E and M, was not sufficiently emphasized, and so we've put a lot of money, something like 10-to-1, in support of STEM education, and not for civics and political science or sociology. That the effort should be made to not so much reverse that, but rather balance that, emphasizing again civics and participation in the country. I really think it's wonderful that Vicki and her counterparts in the other counties are doing what they're doing. I happen to think more civics courses would be to our advantage as a country, just period. Neil.
First of all, I believe that I'm a voter in Florida listening to you, but I do have a second part to my question. Do you have a point of view of what is happening in Georgia?
No, I have to really tell you I haven't kept up with that because my focus has been the Florida legislature. And I told Bob, I said, I think I've already said, with all of this is going on, my head's about straight explode. So no, I've heard a little bit about it. I've read some of what's going on in other states, but whatever happened last night, I didn't have the news on before I got ready this morning. So to keep up with the particulars, we have 50 states, and that's just a little bit more than I can fit in my day. So I have
I hope you don't mind what I said there. Gaming the system against fair voting, which we have in Florida. That's why I'm glad I can vote in Florida.
Shame on them.
Shame on them.
Let me just say, in the package that I sent out 2 nights ago that led with the Sidney Powell articles, there were 2 exhibits that Vicki sent to me that were the supervisor position papers. The 67 election supervisors in the state, their position papers vis-a-vis the bills in the Florida state legislature. And they enumerate all of the issues that have been proposed against which the supervisors are advocating. I think that's really worth reading. And in part, that's an endorsement of what Vicki and her cohorts are doing to keep this election fair and secure. I think it's really extraordinary, especially for a sweet states' right person like Vicki to be so strongly in support of fair and secure voting for everyone. Yes, sir. I'm sorry I don't know your name. John?
John Field.
It was a good guess.
What was the situation in Broward County, West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach County that necessitated the removal of the supervisor?
Okay, so that was couple of years ago, there were a number of things that went on in the county. I will tell you, the state had people in their offices during the time period, in 18, we had, for the first time ever in the state of Florida, 3 simultaneously conducted statewide recounts. Had never happened in the state of Florida. The U.S. Senate race, the governor's race, and the Commissioner of Agriculture race. For the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections, she had the opportunity to update her equipment well in advance of the election, which she did not do. They never completed the recounts, and when we went to a conference in December, mid-December, they were still recounting because they had not finished it. That led to her removal. Broward County, there were quite a few issues there. Apparently our governor at the time felt that administratively she made some bad decisions along the way. Broward County was able to complete their recount in a timely manner. We have a lot of timelines involved in an election. When we report stuff, what we have to do when we report stuff, our election results, at what point in time which ballots are included to decide if there's going to be a recount. So the governor felt that she made a lot of bad administrative decisions, and removed her from the office.
Carol,
as you
you have a
know,
question over here? Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Come here, Carol.
She's turning her mic on, and then Ken will come to you.
There it is. You had said that when you vote, you keep a total record of each person's, the history of our voting. My question to you, does it say how we voted?
No. Only that the fact that you did vote in the election, I can tell if you voted by mail, voted early, or at your precinct on election day. The system that counts your ballot is our tabulation system. It is not tied or coordinated in any way to our voter registration system. They're two separate things.
The other thing that I want to know is, it's not clear to me, will HR, H1, whatever, will that supersede any of the states' voting?
Yes.
It will?
Well, if I just may answer that with a question, I think that the federal government through HR1 can only regulate federal elections, not state elections. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, most all elections we have are federal elections. All of our primaries, we have federal candidates on the ballot, if you think about it, because your U.S. Senator and your congressmen
Those
are
are
on the
federal.
ballot every 2 years.
Good point.
And one thing that you do not want to do is to have two separate systems,
I
one
agree.
for state local elections and one for federal. So consequently, anytime federal legislation has come along, Florida has adopted it into our laws.
You were an elected official, right?
Correct.
And you're telling me you don't check the votes to see who voted for you and who didn't? Ken?
Thank you, Vicki. In the last election, I heard quite a bit about the harvesting of votes. Now, I don't know how significant it really is, but do you know what is the justification for it, and does Florida permit harvesting of votes?
Okay, so everybody knows what we mean by ballot harvesting. It has to do with vote-by-mail ballots. And I will tell you, in our current system, vote-by-mail ballots is the most vulnerable for any voter fraud. Ballot harvesting really was not a problem in St. Johns County that I have been made aware of. Over the years in South Florida, especially Miami-Dade County, there have been elected officials and party people who have been found guilty and gone to jail for the operatives that they hire to go into people's homes to help them vote their ballots, collect their ballots, and turn them in. It is a fact. It has happened in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. The law has changed since then. Currently, in statute, it is against the law to possess more than 2 vote-by-mail ballots other than yourself or one of your family members if you are a paid operative. However, not so if you're a volunteer. Now, the new supervisor that was appointed in Broward County got up before our state legislature and said he sat and watched the video where people were coming and putting handfuls of ballots in his drop boxes that were not manned. In the middle of the night, watched the surveillance video. That's what he said. I checked we have a drop box in front of our office permanently installed, has been since 2012, never had a problem with it. It is 3 cameras on it. We've never noticed any problem with it. However, South Florida seems to have, once again, some problems. It's real. It's out there. I don't like the fact that that the parties or the legislature, and this is one of the things that we are fighting. I don't like the fact that they are trying to restrict ballot return to immediate family members, period, and that you have to show ID when you come use the drop box. I think if you just take the laws that is currently in effect for the paid operatives and make it volunteer and put some stiff penalties on it, that should be the way it should handle. Because if you vote in person, I don't challenge, as a poll worker, I don't challenge your address on your driver's license. If you come to use the vote-by-mail drop box, which is being proposed, that I have to show ID, and if the address on the ID is different than the address on the vote-by-mail ballot, I have to fill out an affidavit. Really? I don't challenge you when you vote in person. We're trying to work some stuff into this. It is real, it is given, it does need to be addressed, but the voter shouldn't be held to the penalty. For example, if Bob is going down to use the drop box at the library and wants to take one of his neighbors' vote-by-mail ballots with him, he ought to be able to do that.
Is Joan Brander here today?
Yeah.
I don't see her, but Joan, you can respond.
Have you been ballot harvesting?
Yes.
Yeah, she confessed to that last week.
Well, you're okay under current law because...
No, but here at Vickers Landing, and I'm sure it's true of several other places, we have several people who don't have cars or not voting. And the idea of ballot harvesting means helping your neighbors. Joan's guilty of that.
Many of the people who live here are in their mid-90s, high 90s, and they don't drive anymore. And during this last election, people were not crazy to use the post office. And so I helped them, and I am guilty. I took their ballots, and they were already sealed, and I put them in the drop box at the library.
Good for you. You're a good neighbor.
Am I in trouble?
No?
Not at all.
Carol Lee.
I think we need to be reasonable. For some reason, good common sense seems to have gone out the window these days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
want to pay a compliment to you about how everything has always been in St. Johns County in all the years that I've lived here. It's been excellent. I do want to ask one question. You mentioned at the legislature, they had contemplated changing the drop boxes. Are there any other bills coming up in the legislature that we should know about?
Well, that one particular bill's 44 pages, and addresses a number of things, not just that. Bob, I sent you the list,
No, I
so
sent-
he has a whole list of them.
I sent it out, and I really recommend you take a look at that. I think it's probably going to pass in some form.
I think it is too, but I have to tell you, our opposition
It's good.
to it was quite unexpected.
And I don't know, I'm curious to know, in Georgia, they must have election supervisors.
You know, it's,
I mean,
every state is, I belong to an association of national election officials. A lot of election officials are appointed. Not all of them are elected. Every state does it differently.
Yeah, that's states' rights, you know, it's good. But I think it is really interesting that the professionals, 67 different election supervisors, unanimously objected to the provisions of these two laws going through the Florida legislature. That's extraordinary, and I'll bet it was a surprise. And I can't imagine they wouldn't listen to professional election supervisors. On the other hand, I'm not that optimistic that the Florida majority, House majority, Senate, and governor won't pass the legislation being promulgated, generally speaking, by the Republicans throughout the country. One of my questions, I wanted to ask you this, Vicki. You know that ALEC, the American Legislative, and I don't know what the NEC stand for, I don't know those acronyms as well as I should, and Heritage, both are responsible for drafting legislation for states.
Okay.
Do you know if they participated in these voter law changes that are being proposed across the country today?
I have no idea.
If anybody can research that or learn more about it, do you understand the question? ALEC, American Legislative...
Election. Just guessing. Sounds like.
Assistants would make it an A. Anyway, organizations whose job it is to draft legislative language to help state legislatures enact laws exist in two places in our system here. One is, I'm sure that exists on the left as well as the right, but on the right it's ALEC and Heritage Foundation. If these laws are similar in 40 states, you got to believe somebody's helping them draft the law. It's not something that spontaneously 40 different states came up with regulation changes or rule changes.
Although states' laws vary so much. If you think about it, for example, with Florida's closed primary, we're only one of 8 states that still have closed primaries, and dependent upon how you define closed, it literally varies state per state about your primaries.
One other question about the state thing. The Voting Rights Act of 65 identified, I want to say 11 or 12 states, essentially largely the Deep South, which states could not make changes to their voter regulations without the approval of the federal government.
Okay.
Shelby County overturned that and said the rules defining which of those states would have to follow that rule must have changed over the years since 65. The John Lewis Act, before the Congress today, I think it's called H.R. 4, but I'm not sure, updates the old Voting Rights Act, something that Shelby County actually invited Congress to do. Said, these coverages are not appropriate anymore. Congress, you should come up with new ones. And until you do, the act doesn't apply. How do you feel about that? You understand that issue, don't you?
Yeah, but I
I
have
don't-
not seen HR 4.
I don't think Florida was one of the states, was it?
Actually, there were 5 counties
In
in Florida
Florida, to which it
that
applied.
that fell under that. Not the entire
Didn't
state,
know that,
but
didn't
5 counties in Florida did.
Interesting. And do you know if those counties, do you know if there's any movement on that that you've read about? I see it always as HR 1, which was for the people, which passed the House. Now you got HR 4, which is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020 or something. I don't think has yet passed the House. I suspect will pass the House. But both have to be approved by the Senate, and neither will meet the 60-vote threshold in the Senate if the filibuster isn't changed.
Yeah.
So, but that would allow the federal government to involve itself in the actions of those 5 counties here, plus those other states that met the requirements. We're past the time. A big hand to Vicki again, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, and hopefully you all have learned something today about our system, and thank you very much. I appreciate the kind remarks from everybody, and I'm privileged to lead a great team. We have 12 full-time employees. We grow to a staff of about 500 to roll out a successful election. So it's all about my team. We have great teamwork.
You lead well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.